In the small town of Stonebrook, Ohio, where everybody knew everybody and the main street smelled of freshly baked bread from the local bakery, there lived a man named Jacob Wilson. He was 32 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with short-cropped black hair and skin the color of dark chocolate. Jacob worked as an auto mechanic at Billy's Good Wrench, a garage where he was valued for his golden hands and ability to breathe life back into even the most hopeless engines. But outside of work, Jacob had another passion: the gym. Iron Haven Gym had become his sanctuary, a place where the clank of weights and the hum of treadmills drowned out the noise of the world. Stonebrook wasn't exactly a bustling metropolis. With a population barely scraping 5,000, it was the kind of place where change came slowly, and outsiders were eyed with suspicion. Jacob had moved there 5 years earlier, drawn by a job offer and the promise of a quieter life after growing up in Cleveland's rougher neighborhoods. He'd carved out a decent existence, steady work, a small rented house on Elm Street, and a routine that kept him grounded. The gym was his escape, a place where he could push his limits and feel in control. Iron Haven wasn't fancy. It was a no-frills, old-school gym with chipped paint on the walls, rusted dumbbells, and a faint smell of sweat that never quite went away. But Jacob loved it. He'd signed up for a yearly membership 2 years back, and since then he'd been a regular, 5 days a week, rain or shine. The owner, a gruff ex-Marine named Hank Grayson, had even given him a nod of approval once, muttering, "You're one of the good ones, kid." For Jacob, that was high praise. But trouble started brewing on a chilly Tuesday evening in late October. Jacob walked into Iron Haven at his usual time, 6:30 p.m., gym bag slung over his shoulder. The place was half empty, just a few guys grunting over the bench press and a woman jogging on a treadmill. He swiped his membership card at the front desk scanner like always. But this time, the machine beeped, an angry red error sound. He frowned and tried again. Same result. Behind the desk, a new employee, a skinny white kid with a buzz cut and a name tag reading Tyler, glanced up from his phone. Says here your membership's been canceled," Tyler said, barely looking at Jacob. "Canceled?" Jacob's voice was calm but firm. "That's gotta be a mistake. I paid for the year up front. Check again." Tyler shrugged, tapping lazily at the computer. "Nope. Canceled as of today. Manager's orders. You'll have to take it up with him." Jacob felt a flicker of irritation but kept his cool. "Hank's here? Let me talk to him." "Nah, he's off today. You can come back tomorrow or whatever." Tyler's tone was dismissive, his eyes already drifting back to his phone. Jacob stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. He wasn't just annoyed, he was confused. He'd never missed a payment, never caused trouble. Hell, he even wiped down the equipment after every use, something half the gym rats didn't bother with. So why this? Why now? "Look, man," Jacob said, leaning slightly on the counter, "I've been coming here for 2 years. There's no reason for this. Can you at least tell me what's going on?" Tyler finally looked up, his expression hardening. "I don't make the rules, okay? It's done. You're out. Maybe try Planet Fitness or something." The casual venom in Tyler's voice hit Jacob like a punch to the gut. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to argue further. Instead, he turned and walked out, the cold night air stinging his face as the gym door slammed shut behind him. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and he could feel it in his bones. That night, Jacob sat in his living room, staring at the wall, replaying the scene in his head. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but he couldn't shake the thought creeping in. Was this about who he was? About the color of his skin? Stonebrook had its share of sideways glances and muttered comments over the years, but he'd brushed them off. This felt different. This felt personal. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He wasn't letting this go. He'd go back to Iron Haven, talk to Hank, and get to the bottom of it. What he didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. A spark that would ignite a firestorm of racial injustice, police indifference, and a fight for dignity that would shake Stonebrook to its core. Got it. I'll make Part 2 flow seamlessly from Part 1, with no obvious transition, and I'll extend it significantly to be much longer than the first part. Here we go. Part 2. The Fight Begins. Jacob barely slept that night, his mind racing with questions and a gnawing sense of unease. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray and orange, he was already up, brewing a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. He wasn't the type to let things fester. He'd learned that lesson growing up in Cleveland, where ignoring a problem just meant it'd come back to bite you harder. So, after choking down a piece of toast and throwing on his jacket, he headed back to Iron Haven. It was Wednesday morning, and Hank would be there. Jacob was determined to get answers. The gym's parking lot was nearly empty when he pulled up in his beat-up Ford pickup, the engine rattling as it idled. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, and took a deep breath. The air smelled of damp leaves and exhaust, a typical fall day in Stonebrook. Inside, the gym was quieter than the night before. Just the hum of a ceiling fan and the faint thud of someone dropping a barbell in the back. Hank was behind the desk this time, flipping through a clipboard of papers. He was a big guy, mid-50s, with a buzz cut gone gray and a permanent scowl etched into his weathered face. When he saw Jacob, his eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything. "Morning, Hank," Jacob started, keeping his tone even. "We need to talk about my membership." Hank didn't look up from his clipboard. "What's there to talk about? It's canceled. End of story." Jacob felt a surge of heat in his chest, but kept his voice steady. "I paid for a full year, Hank, up front. $200 cash, right here at this desk. You gonna tell me why it's suddenly gone?" Hank finally set the clipboard down, crossing his arms over his barrel chest. "Look, Jacob, you're a good guy. I like you. But I got complaints. Customers saying they don't feel comfortable with you around. I run a business here. I gotta keep people happy." "Complaints?" Jacob's brow furrowed. "What complaints?" "I don't talk to anybody. I lift, I leave. Who's got a problem with me?" Hank shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the side. "Doesn't matter who. It's more than one person. They say you're intimidating. That's the word they used. Intimidating." Jacob let out a short, bitter laugh. "Intimidating? I'm 6 feet 2 inches, Hank. I lift weights. This is a gym. Half the guys here are bigger than me. What's this really about?" Hank's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Jacob thought he saw a flicker of guilt in the older man's eyes. But then Hank leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, all right? I'm not in the mood for a debate. Your membership's done. I'll refund you the rest of the year. Just let it go." Jacob didn't move. He stood there, staring at Hank, the pieces clicking together in his mind. Intimidating. Complaints. Customers not feeling comfortable. He'd heard this kind of coded language before, back in Cleveland, when a store clerk followed him around like he was about to steal something, or when a neighbor called the cops because he was loitering in his own damn driveway. This wasn't about his size or his workouts. This was about the one thing he couldn't change. "You're kicking me out because I'm black," Jacob said, the words cutting through the air like a blade. It wasn't a question. Hank's face flushed red, and he slammed a hand on the counter. "Don't you pull that card with me, Wilson. I don't give a damn what color you are. I've got a business to run, and if people don't want to come here because of you, that's on them, not me." "Then tell me who," Jacob shot back, his voice rising despite his best efforts. "Give me names. Let me face these people who are so damn scared of me. You owe me that much." "I don't owe you shit," Hank barked. "This is my place, my rules. Now get out before I call the cops." The threat hung there, heavy and real. Jacob clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to argue, to demand justice right then and there. But he knew how this went. He'd seen it play out too many times. Black man raises his voice, cops show up, and suddenly he's the bad guy. So he turned on his heel and walked out, the door banging shut behind him with a finality that echoed in his ears. But Jacob wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the time he got home, his anger had hardened into resolve. He wasn't just some nobody they could push around. He grabbed his phone and started digging, first calling the gym's corporate office. Turns out Iron Haven was independently owned, no help there, then searching online for anything he could use. He found the gym's membership agreement on an old version of their website, buried in a cached page. It stated clear as day: memberships may only be terminated for non-payment or violation of gym policies. No vague customer complaints clause. Hank was full of it. That's when Jacob decided to take it further. He drove to the Stonebrook Police Department, a squat brick building on the edge of town, and filed a formal complaint. The officer at the desk, a middle-aged guy named Officer Daniels with a beer gut and a bored expression, barely looked up as Jacob explained the situation. "So, you're saying they canceled your gym membership?" Daniels asked, scribbling something on a notepad. "Yeah," Jacob said. "Without cause. I've got the agreement right here. Says they can't do that unless I broke rules or didn't pay. I didn't do either." Daniels sighed, setting his pen down. "Look, Mr. Wilson, this sounds like a civil matter. Private business. Their rules. Not much we can do." "It's discrimination," Jacob pressed. "They're targeting me because I'm black. That's illegal. You're telling me you won't even look into it." Daniels leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I'm telling you it's not a police issue. File a lawsuit if you're so worked up about it. We don't mediate gym memberships." Jacob stared at him, incredulous. "So, that's it? You're just gonna sit there and do nothing?" "Pretty much," Daniels said with a shrug. "Next time, maybe pick a gym that likes you better." The dismissiveness hit Jacob harder than Hank's threats. He left the station fuming, the weight of it all pressing down on him. But he wasn't giving up. If the police wouldn't help, he'd find another way. He spent the rest of the day researching laws, lawyers, anything that could give him a foothold. By nightfall, he'd found a name: Sarah Jennings, a civil rights attorney based in Columbus, 2 hours away. Her website boasted a track record of taking on discrimination cases and winning. Jacob shot her an email, laying out everything: Hank's excuses, the membership agreement, the police brushing him off. He hit send and sat back, a flicker of hope cutting through the exhaustion. What he didn't know was that Stonebrook wasn't going to let this go quietly. Word was already spreading. Small towns love their gossip. And Hank had friends in high places. The next morning, Jacob woke up to a voicemail from an unknown number. It was Officer Daniels, his tone colder than before. "Mr. Wilson, we got a call about you harassing folks at Iron Haven. I suggest you drop this little crusade of yours, or we might have to pay you a visit." Jacob replayed the message 3 times, his heart pounding. Harassing. He hadn't been back since Hank kicked him out. This was a lie, a warning shot, and it only fueled his fire. He called Sarah Jennings that afternoon, and after a 20-minute conversation, she agreed to take his case. "This smells like a textbook discrimination claim," she told him, her voice sharp and confident. "We'll start with a demand letter to the gym. If they don't budge, we sue. You ready for this?" "Hell yes," Jacob said without hesitation. What followed was a whirlwind. Sarah moved fast, drafting a letter that outlined the legal violations: breach of contract, racial discrimination under Ohio law, and a federal civil rights claim under Title II. She sent it to Hank with a deadline: reinstate Jacob's membership and pay damages, or face a lawsuit. Hank's response came 2 days later, hand-delivered by a smirking Tyler, who tossed the envelope on Jacob's porch like it was trash. Inside was a single sentence scrawled in Hank's messy handwriting: "See you in court, asshole." Jacob stared at the note, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Hank wanted a fight? Fine. He'd get one. But this wasn't just about a gym membership anymore. It was about dignity, about standing up to a system that thought it could grind him down and walk away clean. Sarah warned him it'd be ugly. Small towns don't like being called out, and Stonebrook had a history of circling the wagons. She wasn't wrong. Within a week, the whispers started. Neighbors who used to wave at Jacob now avoided his gaze. A co-worker at the garage muttered something about troublemakers under his breath. And then came the first real blow: a brick through his living room window, shattering the glass and leaving a note taped to it that read, "Leave town." Jacob stood there in the dark, glass crunching under his feet, the note trembling in his hand. He called the police again, but this time it was a different officer. Sergeant Malone, a burly guy with a buzz cut and a reputation for being Hank's drinking buddy. Malone took one look at the brick, shrugged, and said, "Probably just kids. We'll file a report. Don't hold your breath." Jacob didn't. He knew the score. The police weren't just indifferent. They were part of it. And as Sarah dug deeper, she uncovered more. Hank's brother-in-law was a county commissioner, and the Stonebrook PD had a long, quiet history of ignoring complaints from anyone who wasn't white and well-connected. This wasn't just a gym kicking him out. It was a town closing ranks. But Jacob had something they didn't expect: resolve. And Sarah had the legal firepower to match it. They filed the lawsuit the next week: Jacob Wilson vs. Ironhaven Gym, Hank Grayson, and the Stonebrook Police Department. The complaint was a beast. 30 pages of allegations, from discrimination to police misconduct to emotional distress. Sarah didn't hold back, and neither did Jacob. He was all in now, ready to drag this fight into the light, no matter how dirty it got. Got it. Part 3 will flow seamlessly from Part 2 and be significantly longer than Parts 1 and 2 combined, packed with drama, detail, and emotional weight to keep your American audience hooked for a 60-minute narration. Here we go. Part 3. The battle lines are drawn. The lawsuit hit Stonebrook like a bomb going off in a sleepy cul-de-sac. By the time the papers were filed in the Franklin County Courthouse, whispers had turned into full-blown chatter. Jacob could feel the shift every time he stepped outside, eyes boring into him at the gas station, hushed conversations cutting off when he walked into the diner for his usual coffee. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a dividing line. Some folks, mostly the younger crowd, and a handful of out-of-towners who'd settled in Stonebrook, gave him nods of quiet support. But the old guard, the ones who'd grown up here, whose families had owned land since the Civil War, they looked at him like he'd spat on their grandmother's graves. Sarah Jennings didn't waste time. She was a shark in a suit, mid-40s, sharp-featured, with a voice that could cut glass. She'd driven up from Columbus the day after the filing, meeting Jacob at his house to strategize. The living room was still a mess from the brick incident. Glass swept into a corner, a tarp taped over the window flapping in the breeze. Sarah didn't flinch. She set her briefcase on his coffee table, pulled out a stack of papers, and got to work. "They're going to play dirty," she warned, her pen tapping the table rhythmically. "Hank's got money, connections, and a town that'll lie for him. We've got the law and the truth. That's enough if we're smart." Jacob nodded, leaning back on his sagging couch. "I'm not backing down, Sarah. They think they can scare me off with a brick and some cop threats? They don't know me." "Good," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Because this is about to get uglier than a hog pen in July." She wasn't kidding. Within days, Hank's lawyer, a slick, overpriced type named Richard Dick Callahan from Dayton, filed a countersuit. It claimed Jacob had harassed gym staff, disrupted business operations, and defamed Iron Haven's reputation. The allegations were flimsy, padded with vague statements and zero evidence, but Callahan didn't need proof to make noise. He was banking on dragging things out, bleeding Jacob dry with legal fees, and turning public opinion against him. And Stonebrook was eating it up. The local paper, the Stonebrook Gazette, ran a front-page story. "Local gym sued in racial dispute. Owner denies claims." The article quoted Hank calling Jacob unhinged and looking for a payout, while conveniently leaving out the membership agreement or the brick through Jacob's window. Jacob read it over breakfast, his coffee going cold as his stomach churned. He wanted to march down to the Gazette office and shove the truth in their faces, but Sarah talked him down. "They're baiting you," she said over the phone. "Act out, and they'll spin it like you're the problem. We stay calm, we stay focused, and we hit them where it hurts, in court." So they did. Sarah filed a motion to dismiss the countersuit, arguing it was baseless retaliation while pushing forward with discovery. She subpoenaed Iron Haven's records, membership logs, payment histories, employee schedules, even security footage from the night Tyler kicked Jacob out. She also requested incident reports from the Stonebrook PD, knowing full well they'd stonewall her. Sure enough, the police responded with a curt letter claiming no relevant records exist, despite Jacob's 2 visits and the brick incident. Sarah smirked when she showed him the response. "They're lying," she said, "and we're going to prove it." Meanwhile, Stonebrook turned into a pressure cooker. Jacob's life became a gauntlet of small, vicious jabs. His truck tires were slashed one night, 4 clean cuts, no witnesses. The garage owner, Billy, started cutting his hours, muttering about keeping the peace with customers who didn't like the drama. A group of teenagers egged his house, their laughter echoing down the street as they ran off into the dark. Each hit stung, but Jacob kept his head up. He'd faced worse. Eviction notices at 16 when his mom lost her job. Fist fights in high school with kids who called him names he wouldn't repeat. This was just a different kind of fight. Then came the depositions. Sarah set them up in a neutral spot, a conference room at a Holiday Inn just outside town, where Hank and his crew couldn't lean on home field advantage. Jacob sat beside her, hands clasped on the table as Callahan strutted in with Hank and Tyler in tow. Hank looked pissed, his face redder than usual, while Tyler slouched in his chair like a kid caught skipping class. Callahan started with Jacob, his voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Wilson, isn't it true you've got a history of causing trouble? Maybe that's why folks don't want you around?" Jacob kept his cool, just like Sarah coached him. "No, sir. I work, I pay my bills, I mind my business. If anyone's got proof otherwise, I'd love to see it. Callahan smirked, scribbling something on his notepad. We'll get to that. How about this discrimination nonsense? You really think a gym's out to get you because you're, how'd you put it, black? I think they canceled my membership for no reason, Jacob said evenly. I think they're lying about complaints, and I think you know why they did it. The lawyer's smirk faltered, but he pressed on, tossing out loaded questions designed to trip Jacob up. Sarah jumped in when needed, objecting to Callahan's badgering, keeping the focus on the facts. Then it was Hank's turn. Sarah took the lead, her tone calm but relentless. Mr. Grayson, can you produce these complaints you mentioned? Emails, letters, anything in writing? Hank shifted in his seat, glaring at her. I don't keep a filing cabinet for every whiny customer. People told me they didn't like him. That's it. So, no evidence, Sarah pressed. Just your word. And you expect us to believe multiple people complained about a man who, by all accounts, kept to himself? They didn't like him, Hank snapped. He's big, he's loud, he's black, Sarah cut in, her voice sharp now. Is that what you were going to say, Mr. Grayson? Hank's mouth clamped shut, his eyes darting to Callahan, who quickly objected. But the damage was done. The room went silent, the weight of Hank's stumble hanging in the air. Tyler's deposition was worse. He mumbled through contradictions, admitting he'd never seen Jacob break a rule but claiming, Hank told me to handle it. By the end, Sarah had enough ammo to bury them. She leaned over to Jacob as they packed up, whispering, We've got them on the ropes. But Stonebrook wasn't done fighting dirty. 2 nights later, Jacob was driving home from a late shift when blue lights flashed in his rear view. He pulled over, hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding. Officer Malone stepped out of the cruiser, swaggering up to Jacob's window with a flashlight in hand. License and registration, he barked. Jacob complied, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. What's this about, officer? Malone didn't answer right away, shining the light in Jacob's eyes. Got a report of a truck like yours speeding through town? You in a hurry tonight? No, sir, Jacob said, his voice steady despite the anger bubbling up. I was doing 30 the whole way. Malone smirked. Step out of the vehicle. What followed was a 20-minute ordeal. Malone searching the truck, tossing tools from the bed onto the pavement, grilling Jacob about where he'd been, what he'd been doing. No ticket, no explanation, just a parting shot as Malone climbed back into his cruiser. Keep your nose clean, Wilson. We're watching you. Jacob stood there on the empty road, the cold biting at his skin, knowing this was retaliation, pure and simple. He called Sarah the next morning, and she was livid. They're harassing you to intimidate you, she said. We're adding this to the suit. Police misconduct, abuse of power. I'm filing a motion for a restraining order against the department. This ends now. The legal wheels kept turning, but the pressure on Jacob didn't let up. His landlord, a jittery old man named Mr. Perkins, showed up one afternoon with an eviction notice. 30 days, Perkins muttered, avoiding Jacob's gaze. I don't want trouble, son. People are talking, and I can't have that here. Trouble, Jacob said, incredulous. I've lived here 5 years, paid rent on time every month. What trouble? Perkins shuffled his feet. Just, folks don't like the mess you're stirring up. I'm sorry, Jacob. I need you out. That night, Jacob sat on his porch, staring at the eviction notice, the weight of it all crashing down. He wasn't just fighting a gym anymore. He was fighting a whole damn town. Friends he'd made over the years stopped calling. His boss at the garage suggested he take some time off. Even the diner waitress, who'd always slipped him an extra biscuit, started treating him like a stranger. It was isolation, slow and deliberate, designed to break him. But it didn't. Instead, it lit a fire. Jacob started documenting everything. Photos of the slashed tires, recordings of Malone's traffic stop. He'd had the presence of mind to hit record on his phone, screenshots of threatening messages popping up on his Facebook from anonymous accounts. He sent it all to Sarah, who was building a case that went beyond Iron Haven now. She reached out to the ACLU, pitching Jacob's story as a textbook example of systemic racism in small-town America. They bit, assigning a co-counsel named Marcus Tate, a heavy hitter with a reputation for dismantling corrupt police departments. The lawsuit ballooned. By mid-December, it wasn't just Jacob V's Iron Haven and the Stonebrook PD. It was a federal case, with the Department of Justice sniffing around after Sarah and Marcus filed a civil rights complaint under Section 1983. Reporters started showing up, first from Columbus, then Cleveland, then national outlets. The Washington Post ran a piece titled "One Man's Fight Against a Town's Prejudice," and suddenly Jacob's face was everywhere. His quiet strength, his refusal to bend, splashed across headlines. Stonebrook doubled down. Hank held a community meeting at the gym, railing against outsiders trying to ruin their way of life. The police chief, a grizzled vet named Paul Decker, gave a press conference claiming Jacob was exaggerating for attention. But the cracks were showing. A former Iron Haven employee, a young woman named Emily Carter, who'd quit months earlier, contacted Sarah anonymously. She'd seen Hank turn away other black customers before, heard him mutter slurs under his breath. "He's a bigot," Emily wrote in her email. "I'll testify if you keep my name out of it." Sarah pounced, securing Emily's affidavit under a pseudonym. It was gold, a first-hand account of a pattern, not just a one-off. She paired it with the membership records finally coughed up in discovery, which showed Jacob's cancellation wasn't logged properly. No official reason, no paper trail, just a blank spot where his name used to be. Callahan tried to spin it as a clerical error, but the judge wasn't buying it. At a preliminary hearing, she denied Hank's motion to dismiss, setting a trial date for March. Jacob's life was a war zone by then. He moved out of his house, crashing with a cousin in Columbus to escape the harassment. His truck got towed one night, impounded on a bogus parking violation claim, and he couldn't afford to get it back. But he kept going. He spoke at a rally organized by a local Black Lives Matter chapter, his voice steady as he told the crowd, "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been told they don't belong." The trial loomed, a showdown that would pit Jacob's truth against Stonebrook's lies. Sarah and Marcus were ready, depositions stacked, witnesses lined up, evidence airtight. Hank and the PD had their own army, Callahan's legal tricks, a roster of upstanding citizens willing to swear Jacob was the problem, and a town itching to bury him. It was David versus Goliath, except this Goliath had badges, buddies in power, and a brick-throwing temper. On the eve of the trial, Jacob sat in his cousin's spare room, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his mom, who'd raised him alone after his dad split, working double shifts to keep food on the table. She'd died 3 years back, but he could still hear her voice. "Don't let 'em walk over you, baby. You're stronger than they know." He clung to that, letting it carry him into the fight of his life. "I assume you meant Part 4, since we've already done Part 3, and you want it bigger than all the previous parts combined. I'll make Part 4 flow seamlessly from Part 3 and expand it massively. Longer than Parts 1, 2, and 3 together, packing in drama, courtroom intensity, and emotional heft for your 60-minute narration. Here we go. Part 4. The Trial and the Town's Reckoning. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray, a bitter wind whipping through Columbus as Jacob stepped out of his cousin's beat-up Honda Civic and onto the courthouse steps. The Franklin County Courthouse loomed ahead, all sharp angles and stone, a fortress of justice that felt more intimidating than welcoming. He adjusted the tie Sarah had insisted he wear, navy blue, a little too tight around his neck, and took a deep breath. Reporters swarmed like flies, cameras flashing, microphones thrusting toward him. "Mr. Wilson, how do you feel going into this?" one shouted. "Think you've got a shot against Stonebrook?" another pressed. Jacob kept his head down, Sarah and Marcus flanking him like bodyguards as they pushed through the chaos and into the building. Inside, the courtroom was a sea of faces, some familiar, most not. Hank sat at the defense table with Callahan, his scowl deeper than ever, his meaty hands clenched into fists. Behind him, a dozen Stonebrook locals filled the benches, men in flannel and women with tight-lipped stares, the kind of crowd that'd cheer a hanging if it was one of their own holding the rope. Officer Malone was there too, in full uniform, his smirk barely hidden, alongside Chief Decker, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. On Jacob's side, the support was thinner. His cousin Darnell, a handful of activists from the Columbus BLM chapter, and Emily Carter, the ex-Iron Haven employee, sitting in the back with a hood pulled low over her face. The air crackled with tension, every glance a loaded gun. Judge Evelyn Harper took the bench, a no-nonsense black woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that could pierce steel. She'd grown up in rural Ohio herself, Sarah had told Jacob, and she didn't suffer fools or liars. "This is a civil case," she began, her voice firm, "but the allegations here cut to the core of what we stand for as a society. I expect both sides to conduct themselves accordingly." Callahan shot Hank a look, as if to say, "Keep your mouth shut," while Sarah gave Jacob a subtle nod. It was game on. Opening statements set the tone. Sarah went first, standing tall in her crisp gray suit, her voice steady but laced with fire. "Jacob Wilson is a man who dared to demand fairness," she said, pacing before the jury. A mix of 8 men and 4 women, half white, half minorities, their faces unreadable. He paid for a service, followed the rules, and was cast out, not for what he did, but for who he is. Iron Haven Jim, under Hank Grayson's leadership, violated his rights under Ohio law and federal statute. The Stonebrook Police Department compounded that injustice with harassment and indifference. This isn't just about a gym membership. It's about a system that punishes a man for the color of his skin and expects him to stay silent. She laid out the evidence, the membership agreement, the lack of documented complaints, Emily's affidavit, the brick, the slashed tires, Malone's traffic stop. "They thought they could break him," she finished, locking eyes with the jury. "They were wrong," Callahan countered with a swagger that bordered on theatrical. "This case is a sham," he declared, gesturing toward Jacob like he was a sideshow act. "Mr. Wilson wants you to believe he's a victim, but what we've got here is a troublemaker with a chip on his shoulder, looking to cash in on a hard-working business owner and a police force just doing their job." Iron Haven canceled his membership based on legitimate customer concerns. The police investigated his complaints and found nothing actionable. He's blown this out of proportion, dragging good people through the mud for his own gain. He painted Jacob as an outsider, a hothead, leaning hard on Hank's community pillar status and the PD's dedication to public safety. It was a slick story, light on facts, heavy on small-town loyalty. The jury listened, stone-faced, as testimony began. Jacob took the stand first, his heart thudding but his voice steady. Sarah guided him through it. His move to Stonebrook, his routine at Iron Haven, the night Tyler turned him away. "I didn't yell, didn't threaten," he said, meeting the juror's eyes. "I just asked why, and they couldn't tell me." When she brought up the harassment, the brick, the tires, the eviction, he didn't flinch, even as his hands trembled slightly under the table. "I've been called names before," he admitted. "But this was different. This was them trying to erase me." Callahan pounced on cross-examination, his tone dripping with skepticism. "You expect us to believe all this? The brick, the tires, just happened because you're black? No proof it was Hank or the police, right? Could have been anyone." "I know what I've lived," Jacob shot back, his voice rising for the first time. "I know what they said, what they did. You don't have to believe me. The evidence does." "Evidence?" Callahan scoffed. "A blurry photo of a brick? A recording of a routine traffic stop? You're reaching, Mr. Wilson." Sarah objected, and Judge Harper sustained, but the damage was in the air, Callahan's seeds of doubt, sown for the jury to chew on. Jacob stepped down, sweat beading on his forehead, feeling the weight of every stare in the room. Hank was next, and he didn't hold back. Under Callahan's softball questions, he played the beleaguered everyman. "I've run Iron Haven for 15 years, he said, his voice gruff. "Never had a problem till he started making noise. Customers complained. He was loud, took up too much space, made 'em uneasy. I had to act." Sarah tore into him on cross, her questions like a scalpel. "Where are these complaints, Mr. Grayson? No emails, no notes, nothing in your records? Who made them?" "I don't write everything down," Hank grumbled. "People talk. I listen." "So it's just your word," Sarah pressed. "And when Mr. Wilson asked for proof, you threatened to call the police. Why?" "He was getting in my face," Hank snapped, his face reddening. "I don't owe him nothing." "You owe him what he paid for," Sarah countered, holding up the membership agreement. "This says you can't cancel without cause. Where's your cause?" Hank floundered, muttering about business decisions, but the jury shifted in their seats, eyes narrowing. Sarah didn't let up, grilling him on Emily's affidavit. Hank denied it, calling her a disgruntled liar, and his ties to the PD. "Your brother-in-law's a county commissioner," she noted. "Ever ask him for favors?" "Objection," Callahan barked. "Speculative." "Sustained," Harper ruled. But the question lingered, a splinter under Hank's bravado. Tyler took the stand next, a nervous wreck. He stuck to Hank's story. Jacob was intimidating. Customers didn't like him, but cracked under Sarah's pressure. "Did you ever see Mr. Wilson break a rule?" she asked. "No," Tyler mumbled. "Did anyone complain to you directly?" Not really. Hank just said." "Hearsay," Callahan cut in, but Sarah waved it off. "So you canceled his membership on Hank's say-so? No proof? No reason?" Tyler squirmed. "I guess." The kid was a mess, and the jury saw it. His fidgeting, his half-answers, a weak link in Hank's chain. Then came the police. Officer Malone swaggered up, all confidence, claiming the traffic stop was routine, the brick report inconclusive. Sarah shredded him, playing the audio of his stop, his taunts, his tossing Jacob's tools. "Does that sound routine to you?" she asked. "We get calls," Malone said, smirking. "I check 'em out." "What call?" Sarah shot back. "No record of it. No log. Just your word. Again." Malone's smirk faded, and Chief Decker didn't fare much better, admitting under oath that the PD prioritized resources away from Jacob's complaints. "We've got bigger problems than gym disputes," he said, but his deflection rang hollow when Sarah revealed a pattern. Dozens of ignored calls from minority residents over the years, pulled from a DOJ audit triggered by her federal filing. Emily's testimony was the gut punch. She testified remotely, voice distorted, identity shielded, but her words hit hard. Hank turned away black folks before, she said. Said they didn't fit the vibe. I heard him call Jacob a slur after he left that night. Callahan tried to discredit her. She's a nobody, a quitter. But her affidavit, paired with the missing records, painted a damning picture. Days turned into weeks, the trial stretching into mid-March. Witnesses piled up, Jacob's co-workers vouching for his character, Stonebrook locals spinning tales of his attitude, experts on discrimination law breaking down Title II and Section 1983. Sarah and Marcus worked like machines, countering Callahan's every move, while Jacob sat there, a rock in the storm, his life dissected for all to see. The media frenzy grew. CNN ran segments, Twitter exploded with hashtag Justice for Jacob, and protesters gathered outside, chanting his name. Stonebrook hated it. Hank's community meeting turned into a rally of its own, with signs reading, "Keep our town ours," and worse. Closing arguments were brutal. Callahan leaned on fear, painting Jacob as a disruptor tearing at Stonebrook's fabric. "This isn't about race," he insisted. "It's about one man's ego versus a community's peace." Sarah went for the heart. "Jacob Wilson didn't ask for this fight," she said, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "He asked for what was his, a membership, a chance to live without being judged. They took that from him, then punished him for speaking up. This is about race, about power, about a town that thinks it's above the law. You have the power to say no more." The jury deliberated for 3 agonizing days. Jacob barely slept, pacing Darnell's apartment, the weight of it all crushing him. Sarah stayed calm. Marcus cracked jokes to lighten the mood, but everyone felt the stakes. On the 3rd morning, they were called back. Judge Harper read the verdict, her voice steady. "On the count of breach of contract, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of racial discrimination under Title II, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of police misconduct under Section 1983, we find for the plaintiff. Damages awarded: $250,000 from Iron Haven Gym, $150,000 from the Stonebrook Police Department, plus legal fees." The courtroom erupted. Gasps from Hank's side, cheers from Jacob's. Hank slammed his fist on the table, Callahan whispering furiously in his ear. Malone stormed out, Decker's face ashen. Jacob just sat there, stunned, as Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "We did it," she said, grinning. "You did it." But it wasn't over. The money was one thing. Nice, sure, enough to start over. But the real win was the fallout. The DOJ launched a full investigation into the Stonebrook PD, suspensions pending for Malone and Decker. Iron Haven shut down a month later, Hank's reputation in tatters, his countersuit dismissed with prejudice. The Gazette ran a grudging retraction, and the town fractured, some calling Jacob a hero, others a villain, but none ignoring him anymore. Jacob moved to Columbus permanently, renting a small place with the payout, fixing up cars on the side while he figured out what came next. He didn't gloat, didn't crow, just kept going, head high, scars and all. Stonebrook tried to forget, but the cracks he'd exposed wouldn't heal. At a quiet diner one night, a stranger, a young black kid, approached him. "Saw you on TV," the kid said. "Thanks, man. Gave me hope." Jacob smiled, the first real one in months. Back in his apartment, he hung a photo on the wall, him and his mom, her arm around his teenage self, both grinning. "Told you I wouldn't let him walk over me," he murmured. The fight had cost him everything: home, friends, peace. But it had given him something too: a voice loud enough to echo beyond Stonebrook into a world that couldn't look away. All right, let's wrap this up with Part 5, the final chapter. I'll keep it flowing seamlessly from Part 4, focusing on the aftermath, Jacob's reflection, and a powerful conclusion that ties everything together for your 60-minute narration. It'll be substantial, but not as sprawling as Part 4, giving a satisfying end for your American audience. Here we go. Part 5. The Echoes of Victory. The weeks after the verdict felt like waking from a long, bruising dream. Jacob settled into his new life in Columbus, the hum of the city a stark contrast to Stonebrook's suffocating quiet. His apartment was small but his own, a one-bedroom on the east side, with a view of a park where kids played basketball until dusk. The $400,000 settlement, minus Sarah and Marcus's cut, wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. He paid off some old debts, bought a used Chevy truck that didn't rattle like his old Ford, and stashed the rest for a rainy day. For the first time in years, he could breathe without looking over his shoulders. But the fight lingered in him, a shadow that didn't fade. He'd check his phone sometimes, half expecting another threatening voicemail, or catch himself tensing when a cop car rolled by. Stonebrook had left its mark, scars deeper than the ones on his tires or his living room window. He didn't talk about it much, even with Darnell, who'd been his rock through it all. "You're a damn legend now," Darnell would say, clapping him on the back over beers at a local bar. "They're still mad as hell down there." Jacob would just nod, sipping his drink, the weight of it all too heavy for words. Stonebrook didn't disappear quietly. The DOJ investigation dragged on, peeling back layers of rot in the police department. Malone got canned 6 months later, caught on body cam roughing up a black teenager in a traffic stop too similar to Jacob's. Decker resigned under pressure, replaced by an outsider who promised reform, though Jacob doubted much would change. Ironhaven's shuttered storefront became a ghost, its faded sign a reminder of Hank's fall. Word was he'd moved to Kentucky, chasing some new venture, but the Gazette stopped mentioning him after a final bitter op-ed blaming liberal meddling for his ruin. The town itself split, half clinging to the old ways, half grudgingly admitting they'd been wrong. Jacob didn't care either way. He was done with them. The spotlight didn't let him go, though. Reporters kept calling, wanting follow-ups, but he turned most down. One exception was a podcast, a gritty, no-filter show run by a guy named Jamal Harris out of Cleveland. Jamal had grown up in the same kind of neighborhood Jacob had, and his questions hit different. "What kept you going, man?" he asked, voice crackling through the mic. "All that hate, all those threats. How'd you not break?" Jacob paused, staring at the wall of the recording studio, the photo of him and his mom flashing in his mind. "My mom," he said finally. "She taught me to stand up even when it's hard. And I kept thinking, if I quit, who else gets crushed next? Some kid who doesn't have a lawyer like Sarah? I couldn't let that happen." The episode went viral, racking up 1 million downloads, and suddenly Jacob's inbox was flooded again. Not with threats this time, but with messages. People thanking him, sharing their own stories of being pushed out, shut down, ignored. A woman from Alabama wrote about a diner that wouldn't serve her. A guy in Oregon said his boss fired him after a customer complaint that smelled like Hank's excuses. It was overwhelming, a chorus of pain and resilience that made Jacob feel less alone. Sarah checked in now and then, her sharp edges softened by their win. "You're a symbol now, whether you like it or not," she told him over coffee one rainy afternoon. People see you and think maybe they can fight too. She'd taken on new cases inspired by his. Smaller battles, but each one chipping away at the same systems. Marcus, meanwhile, was pushing the DOJ to widen their scope, eyeing other Ohio towns with dirty laundry. "This ain't over," he'd say with a grin. "We just lit the match." Jacob wasn't sure he wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to live, work on cars, hit the gym. A new one, no questions asked. Maybe find someone to share it all with someday. But the kid at the diner stuck with him, that shy thanks echoing in his head. So he started small, volunteering at a Columbus community center, teaching teens how to fix engines, talking to them about standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. "You don't have to be loud," he'd tell them. "Just don't let 'em walk over you." Some listened, some didn't, but he saw his younger self in their eyes, hungry, wary, searching for a way out. A year after the trial, he got an invite that stopped him cold. The Ohio Civil Rights Commission wanted to honor him at their annual gala, some fancy dinner in a downtown hotel, all tuxedos and speeches. Darnell pushed him to go. "Man, you earned this. Let 'em clap for you." Jacob resisted. Crowds weren't his thing anymore, but Sarah sealed it. "You're not just there for you," she said. "You're there for everyone who couldn't be." So he went, tugging at the rented tux, feeling out of place among the suits and gowns until they called his name. The room stood, hundreds of people, clapping, cheering, a wave of sound that hit him like a freight train. He walked to the podium, hands shaking, and looked out at the sea of faces. Lawyers, activists, regular folks who'd heard his story. He hadn't prepared much, just a few scribbled notes, but when he spoke, his voice carried. "I didn't want this fight," he started, gripping the mic. "Didn't ask for it. All I wanted was a place to lift weights, to feel like I belonged. They took that from me, not because of what I did, but because of who I am. And when I pushed back, they tried to bury me. But I'm still here. We're still here." He paused, swallowing hard. "This isn't about me winning. It's about us, all of us, saying we're done taking it, done being quiet, done letting them decide who gets to belong." The applause was deafening, rolling over him like thunder. He stepped down, legs unsteady, and Sarah met him with a rare hug. "That's your legacy," she whispered. He didn't feel like a hero, just a guy who'd kept swinging when the bell rang. But as he sat back down, watching the room buzz with energy, he realized something. It wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs, too. Months later, he drove past Stonebrook on a whim, taking the long way to a job in Dayton. The town looked smaller somehow, shabbier, less invincible. Iron Haven's old lot was a Dollar General now, the for sale sign long gone. He didn't stop, didn't need to. Whatever hold it had on him was broken. Back in Columbus, he kept the photo of him and his mom on the wall, a quiet anchor. Beside it, he added something new, a framed copy of the verdict, the words, "For the plaintiff," bold and black. Not a trophy, but a reminder. One night, he sat on his tiny balcony, a beer in hand, the city lights stretching out below. The stars were faint, drowned by the glow, but he stared up anyway. "We did it, Mom," he said softly, the wind carrying his words away. He didn't know what came next. More battles, maybe, or just a quieter life. But for now, he'd won. Not just the case, but the right to be seen, to be heard, to be Jacob Wilson, unbowed and unbroken. And in a world that tried so hard to crush him, that was enough.